Hello, my name is Emily Carter, and this isn't a story I ever thought I'd have to tell. A few weeks ago, I left my son with my parents for what was supposed to be a warm family visit. 2 days later, he came back hungry, quiet, and changed. When I asked why they hadn't fed him, my mother said, "It's just a waste of food." If you've ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect your child, then you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent. They didn't even wait for me to set my bags down before asking, "Did you bring gifts for your sister's kids?" The entryway was overrun with coats, boots, and that fake warmth my mother loved to create with cinnamon-scented candles and soft jazz playing from her vintage radio. I tightened my grip on Noah's backpack, offering a smile that felt more like a mask than a gesture. Irene's little ones love surprises, Mom added, brushing past me without a hug. Noah trailed behind, his quiet footsteps the only acknowledgement of our arrival. I had barely responded before Irene descended the staircase like she was entering a gala. Burgundy cashmere manicured fingers and that smile, the one that never reached her eyes. "Emily," she said, as if tasting something sour. Still driving that old Honda, Noah looked up at me, his hand in mine. "Is Aunt Irene mad?" "No, sweetheart," I murmured. "She's just busy." We made it to the living room. Abigail, Irene's daughter, was spinning in circles near the fireplace, shrieking with delight as Mom clapped along. Noah reached for a wooden toy on the corner shelf. No one noticed. "Juice, please?" he asked softly. Linda looked over her shoulder. "Kitchen's that way. Tap water's fine." Minutes later, Abigail was sipping from a glass of what looked like spiced cider, a cinnamon stick floating inside like a crown. I offered to help with dinner. "Everything's under control," Mom said without looking up from her roasted vegetables. "Why don't you just relax?" So I sat. In a room that wasn't mine, in a house that never really was. "I saw your LinkedIn," Irene said over the sound of chopping. "Still working at that clinic?" "That's noble. Must be hard, though. Teaching yoga on the side, or—" Her voice trailed like it didn't need an answer. Just enough to sting. Later, during the forced family photo session, the camera clicked and flashed. Irene repositioned Abigail to the center. Noah was barely in the frame. Mom didn't say a word. When I tucked him into the guest room that smelled faintly of mildew, I pulled the blanket up to his chin and whispered, "Just a few days, okay, we'll go home soon." His nod was small, brave. Downstairs, glasses clinked. The adults had moved on to wine and whispered politics. I hesitated in the hallway, debating whether to rejoin. "Some people have kids they can't afford," Irene's voice rang out. "Guess that's why they mooch off others." Laughter, a few awkward coughs, and silence. I stood there frozen in place, the wallpaper swirling behind my eyes. I found the guest room window and pressed my forehead to the glass. Cold, quiet. Emily stares out the frosted window and thinks I should never have come back. "Irene's kids are thriving because she married smart," Mom whispered as she handed me a used towel for Noah. It was stiff, the kind of towel that had been laundered too many times and lost its warmth, much like the house around me. I took it wordlessly, kneeling by the sink where Noah was rinsing his hands. He smiled at me, water dripping from his wrists. I dried him gently, ignoring the faint smell of bleach and the way Mom's eyes flicked to the pristine linen stacked behind her. I woke early, hoping to give Noah a moment of peace before the chaos. But the house had its own rhythm. By the time we stepped into the kitchen, Abigail was already seated like a tiny queen, maple syrup, pooling beside a stack of fluffy pancakes adorned with berries. Her giggles bubbled up like carbonation bouncing off the kitchen walls. Noah hesitated. "Can I have pancakes too?" Mom turned, her smile strained. "That food's for guests, sweetheart." She opened a cabinet and pulled out a bag of crackers, stale ones, the kind I remembered from last year's pantry. She offered them like an afterthought. "Here, honey." I reached to take them but paused. "I can make something quick, eggs toast." "We're short on groceries," she said. Voice tight. It's Thanksgiving, Emily. People are coming. Everything's planned. Noah took the crackers without protest, sat on the floor near the fridge and nibbled one edge. Relatives began trickling in as the day unspooled. The hallway echoed with greetings, air kisses, the scent of cheap perfume, and overcooked turkey. Irene floated in and out of conversations like a PR manager at a press event, gracious and poised. Her husband hadn't arrived, but that didn't stop the admiration. He's probably closing another deal, someone said. You know how it is. Always in demand. He works so hard, Mom added, and yet he always makes time for the kids. That's what a provider looks like. Someone turned to me, half remembering. Emily, are you still trying to be a teacher? I nodded, though I was no longer sure what trying meant in their language. Noah tugged my sleeve. Can we go home? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Soon. In the living room, Irene held court. A TV screen showed a slideshow Abigail on stage holding a trophy. Her pre-debate scholarship, Irene beamed. Full ride. Princeton wants her early. Applause rippled. I clapped too softly. Mom leaned over. We just worry you'll never make something of yourself, sweetie. It's not too late to go back to school. I turned toward her, stunned. But her eyes weren't cruel, just pitying. The words pulled at a memory buried deep. 10 years old, holding a cardboard volcano. I had spent days molding the clay, wiring the LED lights. Morning of the science fair, I found it crushed on the floor. Mom barely blinked. You need to be more careful, she said, brushing flour off her apron. Irene stood nearby, pretending to be shocked. Years later, Noah told me he'd seen her do it. Deliberately. And lie. I never said a word. What would have changed? Back in the present, I wandered into the kitchen. Irene was slicing apples precisely like a surgeon prepping an operation. Her bracelet jingled faintly with each motion. I hope Abigail doesn't grow up thinking this is normal, I said. She didn't turn around. What? This, I said, stepping closer. This hierarchy. This subtle cruelty dressed as tradition. She paused, then faced me fully. You made your choices. You chose love. I chose value. And look who's being served first. The knife hit the cutting board, sharp, final. I walked out without a word. My feet carried me through the hall, past the laughter and clinking glasses, until I found Noah curled near the staircase. He was still eating those crackers one bite at a time. He didn't look up when I sat beside him. I watched him for a long moment. Emily looks at her son nibbling crackers in silence and realizes, this isn't just about me anymore. Noah had a fever. Mom said he's probably just spoiled. I pressed my palm gently to his forehead, feeling the heat rising from his skin like steam from a forgotten kettle. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes glassy, and he clung to my arm with fingers that trembled faintly. Do you have any children's medicine? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Mom didn't even turn around. She was slicing pears for one of Irene's elaborate cheese boards. We only keep adult stuff here. Kids don't usually get sick if they're taken care of properly. The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth, closed it again, then forced a nod, and retreated upstairs with Noah in my arms. I laid him on the guest bed and wrapped him in one of the thinner blankets I'd brought from the car. The thick ones, those were apparently all for actual guests. His breathing was shallow, his skin burning. Memories blurred the edge of the moment. I was 8, covered in itchy chickenpox home from school while Mom fussed over Irene's big ballet recital. I sat alone on the bathroom floor with a lukewarm sponge counting the speckles on my arms. I hadn't cried then. I wouldn't now. I found my coat, my purse. We're going to the clinic, I told Noah. His eyelids fluttered. He nodded weakly. When I reached the stairs, Irene appeared at the bottom, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup. You're really blowing this out of proportion, she said before I could speak. It's just a little fever. Let him sleep it off. He's burning up. Kids get warm. It's called being dramatic, Emily. I'm taking him, I said, voice firm. Keys clenched in my hand. You do that? She smiled, brushing imaginary lint off her blouse. Though I'd hate for you to miss lunch. The caterer's bringing beef Wellington. Real pastry, none of that frozen stuff you probably use. I walked past her without a word. Outside, icy air slapped my cheeks. I got Noah into his booster seat, but as I reached for the ignition, his voice stopped me. Mom, can we just go home? My fingers froze on the key. I looked back at him, small, pale eyes half closed. I swallowed the burn in my throat. Not yet, honey. Just a little longer. The clinic was 25 minutes away, and Irene's smug smirk lingered like smoke in my lungs. I hated that I let her get to me. I hated that my parents let this happen. And most of all, I hated myself for not walking out the minute they offered Noah that damp cracker. Back at the house, I tried to make him soup. The kitchen was buzzing with activity, silver platters, cheese knives, warm bread being set on linen. When I opened the fridge, I found a padlock on the catering containers. Linda spotted me. Emily, please don't touch that. It's for the guests. You know how Irene plans everything down to the last olive. He's sick, I said. He needs something warm. There's still some rice in the pantry. There wasn't. I checked. I heated water and crushed a saltine into it. Noah tried to sip it, coughed, and gave up. In the living room, Abigail twirled in her red velvet dress, squealing as she danced to the music in her headphones. Mom clapped softly. Dad sat reading a magazine, his glasses halfway down his nose, never once glancing my way. I pulled Noah onto the couch, wrapped my coat around him, and held him close. He curled into me like he had when he was 3. My throat tightened. Irene's husband arrived, kissed both my parents, and was handed a glass of the expensive wine that used to sit unopened when Daniel was still around. Everyone applauded when he mentioned a possible expansion deal in Florida. Later, I slipped into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the tub. The silence hit me like a wave. I let it wash over me, let my chest ache, let the tears fall silent. Steady, ashamed. It wasn't the crackers or the padlocked fridge or even the way Irene smirked like she'd won. It was the way Noah looked at me, feverish and hopeful, and still too polite to complain. A gentle knock on the door. Mom. His voice was thin. I opened the door and knelt to his level. Can we go home, Mom? He asked again. His eyes searched mine for something safety, maybe. A promise. I nodded. Yes. We're leaving. I packed quietly. A few clothes, his sketchbook, my charger. I left the wine Mom had asked me to bring on the table. Noah waited by the door, bundled in his coat, his small hand clutching mine. We stepped outside into the cold, the door creaking softly behind us. I didn't look back. Running away again, Irene's voice sliced the air from behind. Thought you'd be used to losing by now. I didn't answer. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just kept walking. Don't burn bridges, Mom texted. Family is family. I read it 3 times before tossing the phone face down on the counter. The screen lit up again, another message from Irene, this one adorned with heart emojis and a photo of Abigail holding a paper turkey. We missed you at dessert. Hope Noah's better. Let's do brunch sometime. I didn't respond. My apartment was cold, dim, and messy in the way homes become when they're lived in but not tended to. The December breeze slipped in through the cracked window above the sink, rustling the blinds with a soft, irregular rhythm. Noah was asleep in the bedroom. He hadn't said much since we returned. I hadn't either. I stood in the kitchen staring at the grocery bag I hadn't unpacked yet. When I opened it, I realized half of what I'd packed for him. Snacks, crayons, the dinosaur pajamas he'd picked himself hadn't even been touched. We'd left in such a rush I hadn't thought to check. He'd spent 3 days with dry crackers and cold air. I boiled water for tea. I wouldn't drink, and leaned against the counter scrolling through my phone. Irene's Instagram was the first thing that popped up. So blessed to have a perfect family, the caption read. In the photo, they were all there smiling around the dining room table, gold and amber tones glowing behind them. Irene's dress clung to her like it had been tailored for royalty. Abigail's curls were perfectly pinned. Even Walter had managed to look vaguely proud. There was no sign of Noah, no trace that we'd even been there. I swallowed the taste of metal creeping up my throat. A memory surfaced Mom on the phone with me years ago asking if I could watch Abigail for a weekend while Irene flew to Boston for her Harvard interviews. She's so nervous, you know, and you're just subbing that week, right? I'd said yes, because saying no felt like betrayal. Because I thought that maybe helping would count for something. It hadn't. The kettle screeched. I turned it off, didn't pour the water. Instead, I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor on a blank document. Noah's question echoed in my head. Are we the bad family? I didn't answer him then. I couldn't. But now I wasn't sure silence was still an option. I placed my fingers on the keyboard. Slowly at first, then faster. When love comes with a price tag. That's what I titled it. The words spilled out raw and uneven like breath held too long. I didn't edit, didn't reread. I just wrote. I wrote about Thanksgiving. About Abigail's cider and Noah's tap water. About the padlocked fridge and the wine glass raised as Irene mocked me in front of everyone. About the photo where my son was cropped out. About the voice messages, the stares, the years. And I wrote about love, the kind you chase like a dog chases a stick, thinking if you just run fast enough, maybe this time it won't be a trick. A voice memo buzzed in just as I hit the final period. It was Mom. Emily. I just want to say, we didn't mean to make you feel. Look, I don't want to fight. You're too sensitive sometimes. We tried. You just overreacted, that's all. I closed the app. Then I hovered over the post button. My fingers trembled slightly. Once it was out there, I couldn't pull it back. And maybe nobody would read it. Maybe it would vanish in the endless scroll of holiday recipes and engagement announcements. But maybe someone would see. I clicked it. Posted. Then I turned off the phone. Placed it face down again, this time with more finality. The room was still. The only sound was the whisper of blinds and the hum of the fridge. I didn't cry because I was hurt. I cried because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the one to blame. I left the dishes unwashed, the lights dim, and climbed into bed beside Noah. He murmured something in his sleep, probably a dream about dinosaurs, and curled into the blanket. Somewhere around 2 a.m., my phone pinged from across the room. I ignored it at first. Then another ping. Curious, I got up and unlocked the screen. A message. Unknown number. Your story needs to be heard. Call me. Lisa. I've seen families like yours, Lisa said. The abuse is dressed in pearls and prayer. I blinked at her from across the tiny cafe table. Outside, holiday lights blinked in reds and golds, twinkling like lies. Inside the walls were all exposed brick and polished concrete, trendy in that curated way that made me feel underdressed. My hands cradled a paper cup of too hot coffee I hadn't touched. Lisa didn't bother with hers. She was calm, precise. Her blazer was crisp, her eyes sharp, but it was the stillness that got to me, the kind of quiet that came not from meekness, but from control. She had the kind of presence that didn't beg for attention because it didn't need to. I shifted in my chair. I didn't expect a response that fast. Lisa gave a half smile. I keep an alert on keywords. Your post was raw, unfiltered, and specific. People notice that. I tried to read her expression. Was she just another media vulture circling trauma for clicks? I'd thought about that on the train ride over, but something about the way she sat, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady, made me pause. I'm not trying to ruin anyone, I said more to myself than to her. I just, I didn't know what else to do. Lisa leaned forward slightly. That's how they count on keeping you quiet. Guilt dressed as responsibility. Shame in a family heirloom box. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, I looked down, watched a bead of condensation roll down the side of my cup. They're not cruel, I murmured. Just traditional. It was something I'd whispered to myself for years. Every time Mom insisted I give up my weekend so Irene could focus on her future. Every time Dad looked past me as if I were a ghost in the hallway. Every time they told me Noah was a burden I chose. Now the words sounded like betrayal of myself. Lisa didn't flinch. That kind of tradition lets the strongest write the rules. And you're breaking them, just by telling the truth. The wind rattled the window pane beside us. I could see Noah's reflection in the glass curled into his dinosaur jacket head against the booth cushion. I'd brought him along, but the conversation wasn't for his ears. He was old enough to notice, but still young enough to pretend not to understand. Lisa reached into her satchel and pulled out a thin folder. This is a sample. A column. Anonymized stories. Survivors. Families like yours polished on the outside, poisoned on the inside. We'd change names. You'd have full review. Or, we don't publish at all? That's up to you. I took the folder but didn't open it. I don't think I'm ready for this. Lisa nodded. You might never be. But you already started. We left soon after. She offered me a ride. I declined. I needed the cold air. Needed the noise of the street to drown out the echo of her words. That night, long after Noah had fallen asleep, I opened my laptop not to write, just to look. I stared at the post I'd made. The likes, the shares, the comments piling up. Some supportive, some cruel, some confused. And one unread message from someone named Ruth. Subject, you're not alone. I clicked it. Emily, I'm Ruth. I'm a family law attorney. I read your story 3 times. And I believe you're not only right to speak out, but that you're legally entitled to act. Attached was a PDF. Clean, clinical, terrifying. She had outlined laws around emotional neglect, financial manipulation, civil exposure. She referenced the implied duties of care in extended family support. She cited precedents I didn't understand, but felt the weight of in my chest. The word entitled glowed on the screen. I hadn't felt entitled to anything in years. Not respect, not fairness, not dignity. My hands trembled as I scrolled. At the bottom, a line stood out. This can be more than a story. It can be strategy. Let me know when you're ready. I didn't sleep that night. At 6:41 a.m., I sat up in bed, reached for my phone and dialed Lisa's number. She answered on the second ring. I'm in, I said. Let's write it. But I want names. There was a pause. I could almost hear her smile. Then you'll need a lawyer, she replied. And I know someone who's already on your side. The photo I took of Noah eating alone in the guest room wasn't just a memory, it became Exhibit A. It sat in the middle of my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes. The image was grainy, lit by a single desk lamp, but Noah's posture told the whole story. Curled shoulders, tray on his lap, untouched food beside him. A child fed scraps while laughter echoed from a dining room he wasn't invited to. I hadn't meant to take the photo as evidence, but now it was a weapon. Steam curled from a mug of coffee by my elbow. Outside, the city was quiet in that winter way. Occasional wind gusts, distant sirens, muffled footsteps. Noah was asleep in the next room, his soft breathing a reminder of why this mattered. My laptop screen glowed as Ruth's voice played through my earbuds. Documentation is power, Emily. Silence is complicity. Let's build a trail they can't erase. I'd sent her a folder 2 hours ago, screenshots of texts from Mom. Don't expect extra gifts for Noah this year. We're not a charity. Voice memos from Dad. You married poor. You'll always be poor. And a video I'd forgotten. I recorded Thanksgiving morning. Abigail getting pancakes drizzled in syrup, while Noah was handed a paper plate of crackers and told not to touch the juice. Ruth had responded within minutes. We can work with this. I scrolled through the messages again. My thumb hesitated on one, a group chat from 2 years ago, Irene joking that Emily always shows up empty-handed like her husband's paycheck. Mom had responded with laughing emojis. I forwarded it. Next to the laptop was a manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside were financial statements mostly ignored. But now I pulled one out. March 2021. A recurring line item, $200 ACH transfer, Walter and Linda C. My breath caught. I flipped through the pages. April, May, June. All the same. I'd forgotten. In the early years after Noah's birth, I'd wired them money every month. Guilt, obligation, maybe both. And they never once acknowledged it. No thank you. Just expectations layered like dust. I snapped a photo of the records and sent them too. Ruth pinged back with a thumbs up. Create a duplicate folder. Seal it. Password protect. Store in the cloud and on a flash drive. This isn't paranoia. It's preparation. My fingers moved faster now, copying files, naming them with dates. The folder grew messages, photos, call logs, even a scanned note Noah had written 2 Thanksgivings ago. Mom, can I go home yet? In crayon under a stick figure drawing of himself sitting on a bed alone. I blinked, then saved it with a trembling hand. There was more. A voicemail from Dad on my birthday 2 years ago. I played it back for the first time in months. You know, maybe if you'd made better choices, we wouldn't have to keep covering for you. You married into nothing. Now you expect us to treat your child like he belongs. That's not how this works. I nearly dropped the phone. I included that one too. Each upload felt like lancing a wound. Painful, necessary, clarifying. By 2:13 a.m., the folder was complete. I stared at the list of files, dozens of moments I had swallowed, excused, buried. Now arranged like evidence in a trial. And maybe that's what this was. I texted Ruth. Done. The reply came quickly. You've done well. And I want to introduce you to someone tomorrow. A journalist. I didn't respond immediately. A journalist, Lisa, had been measured ethical. But this was different. This wasn't just my voice, now it was legal. It was systemic. It was truth, pressing against the thin skin of a polished family reputation. I stood and walked into Noah's room. He'd kicked the covers off again, clutching his stuffed raccoon, the one with a worn eye and missing tail. I covered him gently and sat on the edge of the bed. His forehead was cooler now, his breathing steady. But in my chest, something had shifted. This wasn't just a personal wound. This was a case. She wore combat boots and a bulletproof voice. Lisa was not the kind of journalist you ignored. She shook the rain from her leather jacket as she stepped into the cafe, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Her walk was purposeful, not rushed. She slid into the seat across from me without asking if it was taken because she already knew it was. Emily, she said, her tone not soft but not cold either, just precise. Lisa, I nodded, pulling my sleeves over my fingers. My palms had started sweating the moment I walked in, even though the December rain chilled the windows behind me. Between us sat a table with chipped corners and a half-burnt candle in a mason jar. The hum of espresso machines offered background noise, but it was the kind that made you feel like someone was always listening. I like this place, Lisa said, glancing around. Quiet. People mind their business. Yeah, I said, then cleared my throat. Thanks for meeting. She leaned forward. I'm not here to rush you. Ruth briefed me. I just want to talk. I nodded again. She studied me for a moment, then pulled out her phone and tapped on a folder. Can I show you something? I hesitated but nodded. She turned the screen toward me, an article header: Daughter sues parents over emotional neglect, wins case for financial exploitation. She filed 3 years after her father called her a burden in a birthday toast, Lisa said quietly. We helped her tell her story. We didn't change facts. We just gave her the microphone. I scrolled slowly, noting the parallels: an ungrateful daughter, a polished family, a community that said, they seemed so loving. Lisa continued, You're not the first, Emily. You won't be the last. But maybe you can help end the silence. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I said. That's not true, she said, without blinking. You left. You documented. You're here. I looked away toward the window. The rain ran in crooked lines like the years I'd spent drawing boundaries only for them to wash away under obligation. I worry about Noah. So do I, Lisa said. That's why I do this. I was him once. That made me look up. I bounced between foster homes, she said. One of them had a piano we weren't allowed to touch. I used to sit on the floor beside it and imagine the sound. Silence wasn't peaceful, it was enforced. You learn to smile while shrinking. I blinked hard. She tapped her screen again and brought up another case, a podcast episode titled, When Family Fails. She was scared too, Lisa said. We kept her name out of it for a year. Her mother still doesn't know it was her voice, but it helped her reclaim something she lost. I don't know if I want to go public. Then don't. Not today. Maybe not ever. But tell the truth somewhere. Let it live outside your ribs. I picked up my coffee and found it had gone cold. I started, then stopped. Lisa didn't press. She waited. Not in silence, but in patience. I was always the reasonable one, I said finally. The one who backed down. Took the high road. Made excuses. Lisa's voice lowered. What did that cost you? A pause stretched between us longer than the rain outside. I don't want to be pitied, I said. You won't be, she said. You'll be heard. There's a difference. I didn't answer. Not yet. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. If you ever want to write something anonymously, pseudonym, anything, you send it to me. No pressure. Just a door that's open. I took the notebook, the cover soft from wear. Inside the first page was blank. I'll think about it. Lisa smiled, not triumphant, just understanding. That's all I ask. We parted at the door. Her jacket caught the wind as she turned the corner. I stood there for a moment, uncertain whether to feel braver or more exposed. Back at my apartment, I dropped the notebook on the kitchen table and plugged my phone in. Notifications lit up the screen: emails, spam, a school reminder for Noah's parent meeting, and one message from Mom. Stop whining online. Nobody cares. I stared at the screen. Then I opened Lisa's notebook and wrote one sentence. They cared enough to make me quiet. I sent the folder. Within hours, Lisa replied, This isn't a story, it's an exposé. Her voice came through my phone like a match struck in the dark. I hadn't even changed out of my pajamas. The living room was littered with crumpled tissues and a mug of cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink. The silence in the apartment was deceptive underneath it. Something seismic was shifting. Lisa didn't waste time. We'll go with the podcast first, she said. Sharper, rawer, easier to share. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Okay. She paused. You ready? I thought of Ruth's warning. Once it's out there, you don't get to pull it back. I looked at Noah curled up on the couch with his sketch pad. He had drawn a cartoon giraffe giving another giraffe a sandwich. Above it, he'd written in shaky block letters, Everyone eats. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. Later that evening, Lisa invited me to her studio. It wasn't what I expected. No flashy signage, no buzzing control panels. Just a quiet, soundproofed room tucked behind an indie bookstore. Two microphones, a laptop, Christmas lights looped along the ceiling beams softening the mood. Lisa wore a hoodie, hair tied back, eyes sharp. She played the giraffe teaser. A Thanksgiving they won't forget. Her voice began calm but loaded. A child ignored. A mother dismissed. A family that worships image over empathy. This is not fiction. This is the story of Emily, daughter, sister, mother, and how silence almost swallowed her whole. Goosebumps raced down my arms. I haven't said anything false, Lisa said, turning to me, but Ruth's reviewed it all. She's flagged anything we may need to footnote. She handed me her notes, quotes, timestamps, photo references. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown caller. I declined it. Lisa watched me. Still time to pull back. I shook my head. They already took so much. I won't give them my voice, too. We hit upload at midnight. I walked home with my hoodie zipped up, the December wind slicing through the city streets. When I reached my building, I turned my phone off before bed. By morning, I'd missed a storm. The episode had gone viral, over 20,000 downloads by sunrise. A trending hashtag had started to swell, True Feed Every Child. Strangers were sharing their own stories of quiet neglect, invisible cruelty. Anonymous users pulled screenshots from Irene's public posts, noting the contrast between Abigail's polished family photos and the excerpts Lisa had quoted. Some people have kids they can't afford. The duality stung and resonated. I scrolled in stunned silence, eyes wide, breath tight. Noah tugged on my sleeve. Mom, you're in the computer, he said, showing me a Reddit post. It was a thread titled, The Mother Who Spoke Up. I laughed, then cried. He wiped my tears with the sleeve of his Spider-Man pajamas. Then my phone vibrated. I thought it might be Lisa or Ruth, but it was just a single notification, an email. Subject line, from a man who knows your father. I stared at it. My hands went cold. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I turned to Noah, pulled him into my arms, and whispered, I think it's starting. The storm outside my window mirrored the silence in my inbox until Daniel knocked. The rain had taken the power an hour ago. I lit the last candle I had left in the apartment, its flame flickering above an untouched bowl of soup. Noah lay curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, murmuring in half-sleep. The podcast had gone quiet. Lisa was working on edits for episode 2. Ruth had messaged me a rest up, we're almost there, but my phone had since stilled into a dark, silent slab. Then came the knock. Firm, familiar. I paused. Every instinct screamed caution. My building didn't get visitors without a reason. When I opened the door, he stood in the hallway, soaked, breathing like he had just run through the rain and maybe through time. Daniel. His hair was longer, flecked with gray now. His eyes, those same deep-set regret and gentleness. He held up a flashlight. Your kid texted me, he said. Said the lights were out and he missed the stars. I blinked, words slipping through the cracks of my chest. You still use the same number? For Noah. His voice cracked. Always. He stepped inside, shaking off his coat, eyes scanning the space as if to catalog all the things he had missed. Noah stirred but didn't wake. Daniel lowered his voice, respectful, careful. I brought those backup power strips. Still remembered how this building handles weather. I gestured toward the kitchen. The outlet by the fridges probably still alive. He moved with familiarity, plugging in the strips, resetting the Wi-Fi router, checking on Noah without asking. When he returned to the kitchen, I was already setting out 2 chipped mugs. Tea, I offered. He smiled faintly. Thought you'd ask for answers first. Maybe I'm tired of interrogations, I muttered, pouring water from the stovetop kettle I'd boiled minutes earlier. Or maybe I want to see if you have the decency to explain without being prodded. We sat across from each other at the tiny kitchen table, our legs brushing occasionally under the worn wood. The candlelight carved shadows into his face softened mine. The storm drummed steadily on the window's thunder punctuating the air. I wasn't ready back then, he said. To be a father? To be with someone who came with so many expectations. I thought love would be enough. But your family? My family wasn't your excuse. He paused. No. You're right. I use them as an exit. But I've watched Noah grow from the sidelines. Your posts? Your words, that podcast? I never stopped watching. Just couldn't figure out how to reappear without making it worse. I didn't respond immediately. My hand cupped the mug, absorbing its fading heat. You should have come back sooner. He looked toward the living room where Noah's tiny fingers peeked from under the blanket. He's resilient. But no child should be. The candle danced in silence between us. I know what you're doing now, he continued. Lisa's podcast, Ruth's filings. You're burning through years of silence like it was dry paper. And I admire it, I scoffed. They think I'm brave. I feel like I'm just finally exhausted enough to stop caring. Daniel's voice lowered. They shamed you because you chose love. Let me help you finish what you started. I looked at him, eyes narrowing. And how exactly do you plan to help? This isn't just a personal memoir, it's a legal battlefield. He reached into his bag and slid a sealed envelope across the table. You'll want to read this before the next podcast. My fingers hesitated above the paper. What is it? A piece of a conversation I had with your father, months after I left. It's not what you think. But it might explain why he was always so silent. Why he never defended you. I pulled the envelope toward me, heart pounding. You knew him better than I did, Daniel added. But he said something that stuck with me. Silence in this family is inherited like a curse. I think he wanted to break it, Emily. He just didn't know how. Thunder cracked and the lights flickered, then stabilized. The hum of the fridge returned. The heater clicked, alive. Noah stirred and sat up groggily. His eyes found Daniel's silhouette at the table, lit now by electricity instead of candlelight. Dad, he whispered. Daniel turned. Hey, champ. Noah walked over, slowly hugged him without a word, burying his face into Daniel's chest. I stood frozen, heart split and healed in the same moment. As I held the envelope, I knew whatever lay inside would reshape everything. In the envelope was a copy of my grandfather's original will, with my name still on it. The paper trembled in my hand, its yellowed edges soft like cotton, its creases etched by time. Dawn filtered weakly through the blinds, casting a bluish hue across my cluttered bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn up, trying to understand how something I thought was lost had just appeared quietly in an envelope from a man I hadn't seen in years. Daniel was asleep on the living room couch, an empty tea mug beside him, arms folded over his chest, as if bracing himself even in rest. I could still hear the echo of last night, his voice low, honest, maybe even apologetic, as he handed me the envelope. I ran my fingers over the heading Last Will and Testament, Arthur L. Bennett. The seal cracked. The signature crisp. The second page stopped my breath. My name, Emily Bennett Carter. Alongside it, a clause. To my granddaughter who stood by her choices, I leave the Cabin estate and its associated trust. Let her raise her boy in peace. A sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a sob. I scrambled for my phone. Ruth, I whispered. I need you. Now. She picked up immediately, her voice calm and clipped even at 6 a.m. You okay? No. Yes. I don't know. Daniel gave me a will. Grandfather's real will. Silence, then paper shuffling. Read me the date. March 12th, 2018. I heard her exhale. That's 2 weeks before they read you out of the revised version, right? Right. And the witnesses. His friend Charles Denning and, oh my God, Father Kelso. The family priest. That's huge, she murmured. That's extremely valid. I held the phone tighter. So what does it mean? Legally, it means the will they presented at Thanksgiving may be void if it postdates and contradicts this one without valid revocation, especially if coercion or mental incompetence can be proven. Her voice sharpened. This changes everything. Everything. I thought back to that day in the hospital, the fluorescent lights, the white noise of machines. Grandfather had held my hand after Noah was born. He looked tired but alert, and he said something I never quite understood until now. This boy's the future. I'd brushed it off as sentimental. But now it rang like prophecy. The door creaked and Daniel appeared, rubbing his eyes. You read it? I nodded. Where did you find it? My dad kept a lockbox. Never opened it until last week. He scratched the back of his neck. There were old war medals, letters, and this. I studied him in the soft morning light. He looked different now. Not just older, but steadier. The kind of steady I used to pray for. Thank you, I whispered. He didn't reply, only sat beside me and touched the paper gently like it carried ghosts. An alert popped up on my screen. Lisa, we need to talk. One of your mother's friends just contacted me off the record. My stomach dropped. Ruth was still on the line. What's that A text from Lisa? Someone from my mother's circle reached out. That means the podcast is working. It's stirring dust. And someone with a conscience is trying to step out of the shadows. I looked back down at the will. For the first time, this wasn't just about being heard. This was about justice. Legacy. Truth on paper inked by the man who mattered most. We're not done, are we? I asked Ruth. Not even close, she replied. We're just getting started. Irene's closest friend called Lisa, but not to defend her. There are things you don't know, she said. When Lisa played the recording for me the night before, I sat frozen. The voice on the other end trembled not from fear but from something worse. Reluctant truth. She changed it, Mrs. Green confessed. Irene altered the will. Her father never signed the revised version. I was there. Ruth confirmed the chain of custody on both versions. Lisa drafted a release clause. I ironed the dress my grandfather had once complimented me in dusty navy silk hem, slightly frayed. It didn't matter. The return was the message. The gala was already buzzing when I arrived. My heels clicked sharply on the marble floor as I stepped past the heavy doors of the local museum. White string lights dangled from the ceiling like icicles. A string quartet played something delicate and forgettable. I scanned the room, ignoring the startled glances, the not-so-subtle elbow nudges from Irene's orbit. I wasn't supposed to be here. But neither was the truth, and yet it had arrived anyway. Irene stood near the front, radiant under the spotlight's hair in a perfect twist, her laugh loud and calculated. She was working the room like a pro. But when her gaze met mine, it fractured. Just for a beat. A tiny flicker in the left corner of her eye, a twitch at the edge of her mouth. Then she reset. Lisa stood near the silent auction table, chatting with a city council member known for his philanthropic watchdog habits. She wore a soft blue blouse and carried a press badge clipped to her coat, just official enough to blend, just invisible enough to maneuver. In my clutch was an envelope. 2 wills. One dated. One doctored. A waiter passed by with champagne. I took none. The clink of glassware felt too fragile. I made my way across the room in a straight line toward Irene. She broke off from a conversation, turned fully toward me with an air of mock delight. Emily, what a surprise. Her tone scraped against my skin like fine sandpaper. I didn't expect to see you here, she added, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. I'm just here to observe, I said. Nice venue. Her smile slipped for a second. Then Lisa approached the councilman beside us, shook his hand and passed him the envelope. He nodded politely, then flipped it open. Irene saw the transfer. Her nostrils flared. For the first time in forever, I didn't look away. Mrs. Green wasn't here, but her voice might as well have echoed off the walls. On the recording, she'd said he wanted Emily to have it. That's why he left her name on the original. Irene was furious. She had someone redo the paperwork. The councilman closed the folder and leaned toward Lisa, then toward Irene. His voice low, but firm. Whispers began to spread like cigarette smoke. Forgery, inheritance, tampering. Did you hear what Lisa brought in? Irene shifted her weight. Her voice cracked as she tried to recover, launching into her planned speech about legacy and leadership. But the air had changed. The room was listening, but not to her. Lisa drifted back toward me. That did it, she whispered. She's bleeding respect now, not just money. People began glancing between us, some curious, others scandalized. A few averted their eyes entirely. Irene's hands clenched around her champagne flute. When her toast ended, only a handful of people clapped. Then the councilman leaned into Irene, murmuring, "We need to talk tonight." Lisa's podcast dropped at dawn. Title: The Granddaughter Clause. I stared at my phone screen, thumb hovering, the glow of the title illuminating the dark room like a verdict. Noah was still asleep, curled beside a stuffed lion that Daniel had brought last week. The world outside hadn't changed, same gray skyline, same brittle wind, but I had. I wasn't the shadow of a daughter anymore. I was someone who'd made the town hold its breath. I hit play. Lisa's voice, calm and cutting, poured through my earbuds. What does it mean when a family rewrites not just a will, but history? Today, we bring you the story of Emily Carter, a granddaughter, a mother, a woman nearly erased. Each word unpeeled me, not with cruelty, but with precision. She mapped the timeline like a forensic expert, how I sent monthly checks to my parents for household expenses, only to be told later that I was ungrateful. She read from the emails I had long buried, the ones where my mother called me a drain, just days after depositing my transfer. Lisa spliced in Mrs. Green's shaky voice. He never signed the second will. Irene was angry, said it was time Emily learned her place. Then photos. One of Noah eating crackers in the guest room alone. One of Abigail's center frames surrounded by smiles and pie. I didn't realize I was crying until Noah stirred and whispered, "Are you okay, Mom?" I turned to him and nodded, brushing his hair back. "Yeah, baby. I think we're finally being heard." By noon, it wasn't just my inbox overflowing, it was my front steps. A local news van idled across the street. Online, the hashtag #THOS, the granddaughter clause, had begun to trend. Hundreds, then thousands of messages poured in from strangers. Teachers, nurses, veterans, even other daughters who had been cut out for marrying wrong or thinking wrong. Some sent photos of their own Thanksgiving tables, half empty, heavy with silence. I refreshed the podcast stats: 65,000 downloads, then 80, then over 100,000. Irene's lawyer issued a public statement before lunch. The Carter family is a private matter. Allegations made online are taken out of context and will be addressed through appropriate channels. No denial. No clarity, just a tight-lipped deflection wrapped in legal threadbare. Lisa didn't slow down. She posted behind-the-scenes clips, annotated emails, voice clips of me reading from my old journals. I just wanted to be seen, I had written at 19. Not for the damage I caused, but for the person I'm becoming. Near sunset, Ruth called. "We're shifting from narrative to motion," she said. "People are angry. Your case is no longer private. It's precedent." I sat at my desk, laptop open, hands trembling over the keyboard. In my inbox were stories from women named Anna, Fatima, Rachel, all writing the same sentence: "You put words to what we were never allowed to say." Then the call came. Emily Carter. A low male voice said, "This is Harold Linwood representing the Carter family estate. My clients would like to speak with you." Privately, perhaps we can come to an agreement. Agreement. I closed my eyes. You wanted me silent when I was small, invisible when I was young, and obedient when I became inconvenient. I looked out the window. The sky was softening, clouds thinning just enough to let the light through. Tell them I'll see them in court. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Or maybe it was just them. They sat on the far side, Mom rigid in her pearl cardigan, Irene face painted in composure but eyes twitching like a trapped cat. Her lawyer shuffled papers methodically, never looking up. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead mixed with the low murmurs of attorneys, the dull scratch of pens. Even the judge's bench seemed disinterested in comfort. No warmth, no forgiveness, just polished wood and law. I adjusted the microphone in front of me. My hands didn't tremble this time. Ruth sat beside me, her presence calm, her folders neatly tabbed. Daniel was just behind, jaw-clenched, arms folded across his chest. On the opposite bench, Irene avoided my gaze. Judge Morrison, a woman with weathered eyes and the kind of posture that said, "I've seen it all," called the hearing to order. Her tone wasn't impatient, but it wasn't indulgent either. "Ms. Carter, proceed with your testimony." I took a breath. I grew up in that household, I began, voice steady. I contributed financially to that household for years. Despite the emotional neglect, the slights, the clear favoritism, I still wired money every month. Not because they asked nicely, because I thought it would mean something, that maybe I'd earn love, or at least respect. Across the aisle, Mom crossed her arms and looked down. Irene blinked slow and calculated. Ruth handed the judge 2 manila folders. Exhibits A and B original will dated March 12, 2018, and the revised version read, "At the Thanksgiving gathering." Both signatures purported to be from the late Walter Carter. Judge Morrison skimmed the documents. Her brow lifted slightly at the comparison. I continued. My name was in the original will. I wasn't just included, I was entrusted. That copy was hidden. The second will erased me. It also erased my son. The silence that followed felt electric. I have photo evidence of my child being isolated during that Thanksgiving visit. Denied food. Left alone while the rest of the family celebrated. These aren't just bruises to pride. This is a pattern of emotional abuse documented, consistent, and strategic. Irene's lawyer stood abruptly. Your Honor, these accusations border on slander. We move to strike this entire line of narrative. The so-called will could have been forged. The testimony is emotional embellishment meant to smear a reputable family. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Motion denied for now. This hearing is exploratory. I will determine relevance after both parties present. Irene whispered something to her lawyer, who scribbled furiously. Ruth leaned closer and said softly, You've already turned the tide. Then Daniel stood up. Your Honor, he said, voice clear and slow, if permitted. I'd like to serve as a character witness. I've known Emily for 12 years. I saw what this family did to her. I know what they denied Noah. Judge Morrison nodded. Noted. We'll hear from you at the next session. In the corner of the room, a woman with a notepad lifted her pen, one of the local reporters Lisa had tipped off. She didn't speak, didn't flash a camera, but she was writing every detail. The room took on a different air. As we gathered our things, Irene finally looked up. Her voice came low, sharp enough to slice between the whispers. I warned you not to come back. I met her eyes, unblinking. And yet, here I am with the truth. The front page read, From Favorite Daughter to Family, Pariah Emily Carter's Stand for Justice. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. The headline alone carried the weight of everything I had never said out loud. The paper lay folded on the counter next to Noah's cereal bowl. He didn't ask about it, just tapped his spoon against the side of his glass, humming a made-up tune. We'd stopped talking about Grandma's house a few nights ago. The silence was easier for him. For me, it was a strange kind of freedom, dense with guilt but breathable. He looked up. Does this mean we don't go to Grandma's anymore? I smiled gently. No, sweetie. We're going to new places now. The sun filtered in through the blinds. I wiped down the counter with slow, repetitive motions. On the kitchen table was a cardboard box half filled with old photos, birthday cards, and that chipped porcelain angel my mother gave me when I turned 10. The box wasn't for keepsakes, it was for goodbye. Noah watched me quietly. Do we have to throw away the ones with me in them? I shook my head. Just the ones that hurt too much. He seemed to understand. Later that afternoon, I walked him to school. His backpack bounced with each step, and his hair flopped into his eyes. At the gate, he hugged me twice, once like a kid, once like he knew something had shifted. Are you okay, Mom? He asked, tilting his head. I think I'm becoming okay, I replied. After he disappeared into the building, I kept walking. My feet found their way to an old neighborhood I hadn't visited in years where my grandfather used to live. The houses were smaller here, the trees more generous with their shade. I sat on the same bench we'd once shared just outside a worn little park with a rusted swing set. Back then, he would bring me a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and tell me stories about when he served in Korea, about how honor wasn't something anyone gave you. It was what you defended when no one else would. I reached into my bag and pulled out the bundle of letters Daniel had found in the lockbox. My grandfather's script was tight and slanted. I'd only skimmed them before, afraid of what they might reveal. Now I read slowly, letting his voice rise in my head like an echo breaking through fog. One letter dated just months before he passed stopped me cold. They'll never choose you, but one day you'll stop needing them to. And when you do, Emily, you'll be unstoppable. I folded the letter back into its envelope, pressing my hand over it like a blessing. When I got home, Daniel was sitting on the couch cross-legged with Noah's sketchbook in his lap. He didn't look up when I entered. He drew a picture, Daniel said, voice quiet. Us. Just you and him. I walked over and glanced down. 2 stick figures, one with messy hair, one with a red skirt. Noah had drawn a sun, 2 hearts, and a crooked little house behind them. I sat beside him. He's stronger than we give him credit for, Daniel murmured. I nodded. He didn't get that from me. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, then reached out and covered my hand with his. Let me help more. Not just visits. Really show up. For a moment, I wanted to say no. Old instincts, old pain. But then I looked at the drawing again and felt something release inside me. I think we both need that, I said. That night, I opened a blank notebook. My hands hovered over the first page before the words finally came. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about reclamation. I kept writing until my wrist cramped. Just past midnight, I checked the mailbox before bed. A plain white envelope sat alone at the bottom, no stamp hand-delivered. The return address read, Probate Court, Westchester County. I slid it open. Final hearing scheduled in 3 days. She walked into court in pearls. I came with paper signed, notarized, undeniable. The courtroom was full. Not just with bodies, but with something heavier. Expectation. Silence. Breath held. Irene's heels clicked against the marble like a metronome of delusion. She wore cream head held high as if still hosting a charity brunch. The pearls around her neck didn't glint. They strangled. A lawyer followed at her shoulder, eyes darting. I stepped in through the side entrance. No fanfare. Just the weight of truth folded neatly in a manila envelope under my arm. Ruth gave me a single nod. Daniel squeezed my hand. Lisa behind them had her recorder tucked just beneath her coat lapel. She didn't need to speak, this wasn't her episode to narrate. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, his gavel untouched. His reputation was solid, no patience for dramatics, no fear of social reputation. He looked down at us all like a parent who'd long grown tired of excuses. Let's proceed. Ruth rose first. Her voice was calm, clinical, and irrefutable. Your Honor, we submit the final affidavit signed by Mr. Edward Flynn, former counsel to Irene Carter, dated and notarized 2 weeks ago. She passed the document to the bailiff. I didn't flinch as it changed hands. Irene did. Judge Morrison adjusted his glasses, read for a moment. Then again. He lifted his gaze slowly. Mrs. Carter, it appears your counsel attests you knowingly altered a prior legal testament without consent from the original parties. Do you contest this? Irene didn't stand. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering too loudly, "We object to the characterization of alteration. Our position maintains it was a codicil of convenience, not fraud." The judge gave a short breath that sounded like a laugh without humor. The law doesn't recognize convenience as a valid reason to erase a legal error. Irene's eyes met mine then, hard cold but shrinking. I stared back. No words, just presence. Ruth cleared her throat. Furthermore, Your Honor, we request recognition of the original will dated March 12, 2018, with all associated entitlements reinstated to Ms. Emily Carter and a formal public acknowledgement of her standing as Mr. Charles Carter's direct beneficiary. There was a pause, the kind that felt carved in stone. Judge Morrison tapped the side of his gavel once, not a ruling yet, just a rhythm. The court accepts. The original will stands. Ms. Carter, your grandfather's estate, real and symbolic, is yours by law. The record will reflect that. No cheers, no claps. Just the scrape of a chair leg somewhere in the gallery, and Irene storming out before the ruling had even been formally written. No one followed. I remained seated until the judge exited. Only then did I rise. Daniel took Noah's hand from Ruth's, and together we left through the front. Outside, the sky was gray but open. We didn't speak in the car. Noah napped in the back seat, his head tilted toward the window, one crayon still clutched in his hand. When we parked beside the small cemetery, the trees had begun to shed, the air filled with the hush of falling leaves. I carried a small letter in my coat pocket, folded twice, written last night by hand. The headstone hadn't changed, still granite, still clean. I knelt and placed the letter just under the base, tucked from the wind. "Grandpa," I whispered, "it's done." Daniel stayed back, giving me space. Noah joined me, clutching a rock he'd found in the parking lot. "What did you write?" he asked. Something I needed to say, to thank him. He nodded, then looked up. "Are we free now?" I looked at his face, his clear, wide eyes. I thought about the court, the podcast, the countless hours of remembering things I'd once buried. "We're whole," I said. "That's better." He reached up and took my hand, held it tight. For a moment, I wasn't leading him. He was anchoring me. That night after dinner, I sifted through unopened mail on the counter. One envelope thicker than the rest caught my eye. The return address read, Klein and Moritz, Legal and Policy Group. Inside was a simple letter. Ms. Carter, your story has begun conversations far beyond this courtroom. We're organizing a symposium on systemic emotional abuse within family legal structures and would be honored to have you speak. No pressure, your voice already speaks volumes. But if you ever wish to step further into that light, we will stand with you. I didn't open the rest. Not yet. They tried to write me out of the will, the room, the very story of my own blood. But paper holds memory and truth. Once spoken, doesn't flinch. Justice didn't come in thunder. It arrived in steps, document by document, silence broken by voice, love reclaimed by fight. Like a storm clearing to reveal the wreckage and the road forward, I stood not as their shame, but as the verdict they couldn't outrun. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like this story, Leave a comment, type 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if you wished for a different ending. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories where truth finally speaks.